Do you think that trauma ever goes away? Like, do you think that you're healed?
Fuck no.
Her name is Timea Nagy, internationally recognized for her advocacy, trying to fight for victims of human trafficking, sex trafficking.
I walked around for 15 years. For me, it's your responsibility to heal your trauma. It's not the world's responsibility. It's your freaking responsibility.
You're someone who not only survived, but escaped and thrived after being a victim of human trafficking.
For me, the world owes me because I'm a poor victim. Yes, did I have a really shitty life? Yes. My cards were pretty bad. But I know 500 million people, if not more, who had even worse than I did. So get up, and it's up to you. Do you want a good life or you don't? If you want a good life, then you need to get out of victim mindset and get your life together.
Welcome back to another episode of Who Judges the Judge, the podcast meant to make you question the way you judge the world around you. I'm so hyped about today's guest. Her name is Timea Nagy. If you don't know who that is, stop listening for 2 seconds and Google her name, because what you will find is a woman who is internationally recognized for her advocacy, trying to fight for victims of human trafficking, sex trafficking in particular, but all forms of human trafficking. She has been doing this work for literally decades. It started as an idea called Walk With Me. Walk With Me turned into the very first victim services organization that opened up the very first safe house in Canada that really helped form the way in which victims of human trafficking are dealt with today by police officers, by crown attorneys, by the courts. She really, truly is a front runner in this sphere. She's written a best-selling book. She's appeared on all sorts of panels and conferences, but this is her very first podcast. And I am so honored to have her. Full disclosure, we are friends. And so I thank you. And yeah, I tapped you and was like, I need you on the show. And I'm honored that you said yes, because I know you don't do these. You like have a policy. You just don't do podcasts. Why is that? And why me? And why here?
Well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. It's like I'm exhausted just listening to this. That no wonder why my back is killing me after all that. But I'm listening to you.
Your back is killing you because you carry this weight on your shoulders and have for 20 years of your life.
Yeah, that's what a naturopath would tell me. But
yeah.
I'm listening to you, and just, while I'm listening to you, I know you because we're friends. And maybe one day I have the honor to introduce you, because that's why we are friends, because of who you are and everything that you achieve. So why I said yes, because I know you're going to ask all the right questions. I know we're going to have a really good conversation. There's not going to be trauma porn, which we can talk about later if you want. But we always have hours of really cool conversations. And even back in the day when we started going out to dinners, I wish that there was cameras around us, because I think one thing that makes us so special is how very different we are in so many ways.
Yes.
But also how very similar we are in so many ways. And I'm just incredibly intrigued. So the honor is all mine to be here. And yeah, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't watch podcasts. But I actually watched yours several times. I'm like, wow, hey, where did you learn the whole media thing, which is like amazing, amazing. And I love the conversations that you're having. So I trust you. So see what happens. So
absolutely,
thank you.
Absolutely. And I do want, like I said to you, this podcast is about changing the way that people judge the world around them. And so, you mentioned trauma porn. We're not here to talk war stories. The reality is you're someone who not only survived, but escaped and thrived after being a victim of human trafficking, trafficked from Hungary originally, ended up in Canada. You were rescued by an officer who you then became friends with, who you then eventually helped change the way in which victims of human trafficking are dealt with. Because back then, it was the prostitute that was criminalized. And so there was no, lens through which the quote unquote victim of prostitution was seen, because the prostitute was never the victim. She was the criminal for many, many years. You changed that.
Well, I was one of them. Thank you. But yeah, you're right. That was the first thing that strike me when I started this work is that when I started, say, raising money for human trafficking, that was just a few months in to the work, people are like, oh, I don't support prostitution. I'm like, oh, great. Neither am I. But this is about human trafficking. Now, here's the thing. And even that sentence is not correct because I support everybody when they need to make a choice. And it's not really a choice, but it is a choice. It's a long conversation. You and I had this many times. But who the hell am I to judge anybody for how they're going to survive and the choices they make with the cards that was dealt to them, you know? So I was trafficked, yes, but then I went back and I was a sex worker for a while too.
Right.
And so that's why it was really hard for me to jump on that like illegalized prostitution. I was never a huge fan. I was a huge fan of decriminalizing, just I think it's a little bit different conversation. But yeah, when I started talking to police officers and I shared my stories, many stories about being trafficked, the first thing they thought, wow, all these years, I thought I was just arresting prostitutes. And you know what? Here's another thing.
And what year was this? Let's situate this for
Yeah,
people.
sure. 2009.
So 2009,
Yeah.
which isn't very long ago at all.
No.
You start having these conversations with police officers, and they're not seeing what we think of today as the quote unquote victim as victim.
Correct. So not police officers, not social workers, immigration, nobody.
Right.
Nobody see them as victims because nobody understood. And so I always said in my presentations, like, there's no such a thing as a 5 years old little girl gets up and says, Mommy, I want to be having sex 15 times a day with men I never met because I think that's such a great way to live. That's what I want. Nobody says that.
Right.
But same as pimps, no 5 years old little boys wake up and say, you know, hey, I want to beat up women one day and I want to take their money and this is what I want to do. That's a whole other conversation, but let's just focus on the girls for now. Yeah. So when I had these conversations with officers or anybody, they're like, oh, but because I started my story way before.
Right.
I made them understand who I was as a human being, as a person, as a little girl, with the mother who was a cop, that I didn't like necessarily chose this the first time around, right? And I think they needed to see that connection. And that's why I love your podcast, Who Judges the Judge, and have different, like, just stop judging. Like, everybody has a story. Everybody. The bad guys, the victims, the police, the social, everybody has a story, right?
I love that you see that side now because when you and I first started talking, that was not your perspective.
Not at all.
I'll never forget our first conversation. I was in Oshawa court and I was representing a guy who was charged with over 100 different counts of human trafficking relating to, I think it was 6 victims.
Right.
And he had a co-accused who I always saw as a real bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a co-accused who was going to libraries every Friday evening and looking for the girl studying alone because he knew that that girl had such low self-esteem. She was in a library by herself on a Friday night and younger girls, then it was easy for him to procure her into prostitution. And it was something that he was doing repeatedly, and that was sort of his MO. My boy had been dating a girl who was a sex worker, and, you know, he was friends with the co-accused, and just sort of they made their way from Nova Scotia into Montreal, picked up some more girls in Montreal, and made their way into Oshawa. And of course, unbeknownst to me, the young women that were rescued from the situation that these men were having at the hotel made their way to your safe house. And you were protecting these girls, and I was representing the one guy. And we get to the preliminary hearing, and I'll never forget. It was like 2 or 3 days into cross-examining this one girl, and every one of her answers was directed over my shoulder. Looking, and I see you in the courtroom. I don't know who you were. I thought friend or family or something. Back then, you know, there were no victim services necessarily that was there for these young women, and certainly not to the same visibility that it is now. I mean, now it's par for the course, but
Right.
back then, it wasn't. And I'll never forget. I called her out. Who are you talking to? and I could basically hear you tense up in the back of the
I
courtroom.
was thinking my chair. I'm like, damn it.
I'm like, who are you looking at? What are you doing? What's happening over here? And it wasn't because I necessarily cared. I just wanted to make sure that someone wasn't feeding her the answers.
Right.
And we get to the end of the preliminary hearing, and I've completely shredded the Crown's case against my client to the fact that I think, he had been in for 9 months. We pled him to a single count of simple assault, and he walked out of jail.
Can I just add something? You didn't just shred the case against your client. You actually helped my victim too. If you remember that,
I do.
this is what I was noticing about you. And that was the first time, who the hell is this chick? I need to talk to her. Because not only that, the way you ask the questions, I'm like, how does she know this world? How the hell does she know all this? You seem so knowledgeable. I'm like, oh shit, we are in so much trouble, man. So you just went. And the other thing that I really respected about you, how much respect you had for the victim. You did your job. You had to do what you had to do. You had to ask the hard questions. You did your job. Not only you did your job, you did it so respectfully towards that victim on the stand. And I'm like, man, if that was me on the stand, I would have thanked the God a million times that you were a defense lawyer and not some other scum. I'm sorry. But I had some terrible defense lawyers during my case. And I know that's your job. I know now, but back then I didn't know. Now I know it's a job and blah, blah, blah.
But there's a way we can do our job effectively without necessarily destroying another human being.
And you showed that to me that day in court. And I said, why others can't do it? So not only you helped you didn't help my victim, but you were respectful with the victim. And you also got your guy off. And you also were able to, and you did the Crown's job in a way too by seeing the court that it's the other guy who's the really, really, really bad guy. And that's where we should be looking at. And so, yeah, I hunted you down. The cops were like, you're not allowed to talk to the defense team. I'm like, screw that. I'm going to go after this woman and I'm going to find out who the hell is she because I need to get to know her.
And I'll never forget. I was like, job well done. Clients out of custody. Got him simple assault. All the human trafficking charges were dropped. I was feeling good. And I'll never forget, I hear you yelling, excuse me, excuse me. I'm like, oh, no. I got some crazy social worker feminist that's about to attack me. And I turn around and I'm like, oh, I'm going to hear all about how can you do this to a woman? And that wasn't the conversation at all. You were like, you're amazing. And I just want to sit down and understand who you are and where you're coming from.
And to your point, when you said that's not how we were first when we met, you taught me a lot about the other side. And that actually sent me down on a journey that a lot of people from my world didn't fully understand at the very beginning. Now they really do, which was I just wanted to go and find pimps who are no longer pimping, and I wanted to talk to them because I wanted to know where they come from. So it really what happened is I met you, and probably a couple of months later, I had to go and do a testifying in a House of Commons. And I got up and I did my speech as I usually do, no 5 years old, blah, 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 all passionate. And then as I sat back down, wait a minute, what about the 5 years old boys? How do they get to become an abuser or whatever? And that really sent me down on a journey. And that's when I just really wanted to know you. And I wanted to have all kinds of conversations with you because you and I are very different on a lot of things. When we met, you hated cops, not hated, but just maybe hated. I don't know. But there was just a lot about I'm not sure if I get, you know what I mean? We had very different opinions about law enforcement and policing. And I do remember you saying that, well, if they would just do their job properly, then I wouldn't have a job. I'm like, that's fair.
And it's still like that.
That's fair.
15 years later, and I still say that if the police did their job the way they needed to do their job, and especially now with the way my practice is, 80% of my practice at this point is constitutional litigation. where I'm, arguing that the rights of my clients have been violated, the police don't need to violate people's rights in order to do their job properly.
Right.
And when they violate people's rights in attempting to do their own job, eventually the charges collapse.
Right.
And so I've always said that, and I'm still taking cops to task as often as possible. That
and
hasn't
I
changed.
actually have friends who kind of like, your friend was, there and she's awesome. And when I ever get in trouble, I'm going to, need her number. But back to that really sent me down in another path where really just what really led me to just learn about trauma, unresolved trauma, which is my big thing now. Because at the bottom line, you look at somebody who becomes an abuser or somebody who's a victim. What really happens to an abuser? They get caught, they go to jail, but there's no help. Right. Nobody ever talks about, but why are you inflicting your pain on somebody else?
Yes.
We know it's trauma. Are we dealing with trauma? No. What about the victim? So the victim gets rescued, gets all the support as she should, because she's the one who's physically and all, there's all the pain there. But nobody goes to the root causes either. So what happens? This one goes back to society, victim, with not enough help, right? And then he goes back to society, or she, and with no help, nothing was resolved. So what's going to happen next? He's going to continue doing what he's doing. She's going to continue what she, nobody chooses. They don't choose this. They didn't choose this. So anyways, that's the journey I'm on right now, to figure out how the hell can we get the entire society to figure it out, to stop putting Band-Aid solutions everywhere. And now how are we going to actually start getting to the root causes? That's a whole other conversation, but that's where I'm at now.
Well, and I think we've also swung the pendulum way too far in the other direction, to the point where all of these so-called victims are treated with such kid gloves, and they're actually incentivized. Some of them, not all, some of them are incentivized to lie about the way in which they're treated by some of these men.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm seeing, or have been seeing, situations. I haven't done a human trafficking case in a very long time, but when I was, situations in which a woman has entered into sex trafficking and is now told that if she labels herself a victim, and if she puts herself into the place of being a victim, which is different from just a sex worker. Not every sex worker is a victim of sex trafficking. Correct. So sex workers who are told, listen, if you're a victim of sex trafficking, if someone is forcing you to do this, then hey, we have free housing for you. We got all kinds of safe houses being offered. We have free counseling. We have free food. You're going to be looked after. You're treated to different commodities that aren't accessible to you if you're just a sex worker.
Right.
And so there's this incentivization to create victims in situations where they may not be victims.
Yeah.
And the result is you've got a guy who is maybe providing some protection, who is truly trying to help this woman, or who's doing nothing at all but living under her roof, who's now in handcuffs, being charged with sex trafficking, looking at a penitentiary sentence.
So I haven't done I do very rarely some frontline work. I have, because I've been removed for a long time. I have not personally experienced what you're saying.
What's happening in the courts right now is crazy. Crazy the way that victims are being protected by the system. And when I think back to the way things were, when you and I first met, I think it was 2011 or 2012. Crown attorneys didn't even understand the way that, escorting worked.
It was
the way
nothing.
They didn't understand any of it.
But so here's the thing though. And so again, I'm not familiar with cases, and I'm not saying it's not happening.
Yeah.
I'm not in the game enough to know. But because it's such a big phenomena, human trafficking, and it is really happening, right? There's a large percentage of victims that are really victimized.
Yes.
And it's the kind of trauma that is really, really hard to reverse if you don't have support, right? It's going to take years, 10, 20, 30, 40, or a lifetime. And
do you think that trauma ever goes away? Do you think that you're healed?
Fuck no. Excuse me.
No, please.
No.
Right.
No, I don't think you heal trauma.
Right.
I think
you grow around it.
I think the goal is to have way more good days than bad days.
Right.
And then when you pass I'm having a lot of good days, what the hell am I going to do with my life now that I'm happier than I ever been?
Right.
And you always think the shoe is going to drop. It's no matter how healed you are, I think, The shoe will, so here's the thing. The shoe will freaking drop. It's just life goes up and down, but it's just building a trauma resilience and understanding yourself enough and understanding your trauma. So three things. I think it's your responsibility to heal your trauma. It's not the world's responsibility. It's your freaking responsibility to take charge of your trauma. So number one, take responsibility for your healing. Don't bleed on people who didn't cut you. And I know it sounds very, very harsh, but I actually mean this from love. It's like I've done this. I walked around for 15 years, poor me with the victim sign. Not, it was before I became a speaker, to say, poor me, the world owes me because I'm a poor victim. Yes. Did I have a really shitty life? Yes. My cards were pretty, pretty bad. But I know 500 million people, if not more, who had even worse than I did. So get up. And it's up to you. Do you want a good life or you don't? If you want a good life, then you need to stop pulling the victim card everywhere you go. Get out of victim mindset and get your life together. But do I think, can you heal trauma? No. Can you heal your mindset? Yeah, I think you can. And that is your responsibility. No one else will be able to do it for you. And so I sound harsh sometimes. And when I do these workshops, people would be like, well, you sound like you're victim blaming. No, sweetheart, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying, do you want to have a good life or not? That's the bottom. And I love people. And I'm very protective of victims and survivors. But I'm also like blunt when it comes to that. Like, yes, terrible life you got. I'm so sorry. What do you want to do about it? And if you want to do something about it, I'm your gal. But if you want to keep on going and feeling bad for yourself, totally fine. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that I don't think you're going to have more better days than bad days if you keep going. That's all. And I say this all with love because I know, and you and I both know, life can be so freaking delicious when you take charge, right? So I know it was a big loop, but yeah.
That's okay.
It's a big one.
I like your big loop.
Right. All right.
No, listen, I do not believe in the victimization. I do think that there are survivors. I do think that we need to help heal trauma on both sides of that spectrum. You know, I've tried to open up your eyes as well, and anyone that will listen, that the young men that are being pulled into that life, it's the same pull as the drug game. It's the same pull as these kids that are running around now doing all these carjackings and home invasions, you know, fast money. They feel completely hopeless. It's the same mentality. And if we don't look at why they are entering their teenage years with this mentality and we don't fix that before the age of 12 when they can get arrested, they're lost. And I've been saying for so long, you know, I don't think we need to spend more money. Like the conservative in me is always like, yeah, but how much money are we going to throw at, you know, these social programs? But the reality is if we're going to spend $100,000 a year to keep these same men incarcerated when they finally, you know, do something that's worthy of long-term incarceration in the penitentiary, that same $100,000 could be front loaded to the beginning of their life so that they can actually have hope and an education and employment opportunities and heal intergenerational trauma, which is such a huge piece. Like such a huge piece.
I love that you say that. So I went down on a journey last 2 years. It's one thing after another, but I stumbled upon material that's neuroscience and trauma and cell biology. I know it's going to go through everybody's head, but what it really says is that scientifically,
yes,
there are chemicals that's being released in your body that is kind of like a drug that keep released by certain behavior and thoughts. So if you epigenetics, right?
Yes.
First of all, if you're already born into an environment where there's already stress and you're coming from generational trauma,
yes,
in a third trimester of the pregnancy, as a baby, you start being fed with hormones, stress hormones. So as a baby, you already start feeling crappy about yourself and you don't even know that. So now then you're born and you're born into an environment where your family, your immediate environment is either you're poor, you're going to die poor, but whatever they put in or your parents died in the Holocaust and, you know, we hate, whatever that is, And then that stays with if your family is gangsters or my mom was a cop, My mom was a cop. Of course I was going to be a cop. Of course I wanted to be on the side of the law. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's stealing me, but whatever. But there's childhood trauma. So the next thing I learned is that until you are 7 years old, your brain actually is in a recording mode, meaning the part of your brain where you can actually deflect facts that's being told to you, you're ugly, you're an idiot, you're this, that, you're not good enough, whatever. There's no part of your brain that can say, no, that's not true. So you take it in. Oh, it's a fact, it's a fact, it's a fact, it's a fact, it's a fact. You don't even know, but you're being programmed in your subconscious mind. So that program, like a computer, becomes your programming. And that's how you start seeing the world. So the guy that I'm mentoring, he grew up in Ragsdale and people of color, men of color family. And his family was gangsters, right? That's all he knows. That's his programming. And that's his normal. My normal was being a victim because my mom had a victim mentality because she had generational trauma and she lived in full-blown victim mentality. So I was actually groomed from the time I was born to be a victim. Poor me, no one helps us. You can't help yourself. You're gonna be poor. You're gonna die poor. No, like you
Even
poor.
as a cop?
As a cop, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's from
just to
the
situate
financial.
this for people that like don't know your story. You grew up in Hungary.
Yeah.
And so your mom was a cop, but you still grew up poor.
Oh, we were like dirt poor because my dad left young. But here's the thing: my mom made good money, but now I know that she had financial trauma, which was her subconscious programming from her family who lived through wars. So everybody was broke. Nobody had nothing. So my mom's complete normal was when the checks would come or the bills would come once a month to break down and cry. Oh my God, there's bills. Oh my God, I need to cry. Because her mom did that. So guess what I did for the first 25 years of my life? Break down and cry when I seen a bill. Who does that?
Wow.
Who does that? So it took me 40 years to figure it. Oh my God, why am I crying? But I needed help and mentors and whatever. But when I went down in this rabbit hole the last 2 years, neuroscience, epigenetics, all that, I learned the science side of trauma, which is freaking fascinating. So what I did is, and I don't want to dive into it, but I read Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, like all the neuroscientists, cell biologists who explain to you what happens to you scientifically inside of your body when you grow up in survival mode and victim mentality. And the short version is that at the child age, you start creating these hormones and becomes a behavior. It's just the hormones that you create is when you react to stress. So you learn to react to stress by creating these hormones. And these hormones send you into more stress and they send you into survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, the part of your brain starts activated, which is your subconscious, which is where your programming is, which is do the shortcuts. You are an idiot. You're a moron. You need to cheat, lie, and steal. That's the only way to get to things, right? So science was freaking crazy for me. I'm like, okay. And on the top of it, I learned that being in survival mode is actually a chemical addiction. Because when you get into stress, your brain releases these chemicals, but these chemicals actually make you feel good for a minute. But it comes with a whole bunch of trauma and drama. So you need the trauma and drama because that's the only way you know how to get that 2 seconds of relief of love. It's the same thing that your brain and body goes through when you start doing drugs. So it's actually addictive. So that specific hormone that's being released is actually addictive. So I looked through my life. I'm like, I lived in crisis mode for 45 years, no matter what, even though I did well and I became a speaker and this and that. But in so many ways in my life, I was in crisis mode.
Well, you lived through other people's traumas for a long time. When you had your safe house and then shortly after, like when you were on the front line dealing with victims, like I remember you would call me and say, I haven't slept in 3 days and I got to save this girl and I'm hiding her out and I'm moving her from place to place because the pimp is trying to like steal her back. Like you literally lived through her trauma with her, trying to save her, not obviously putting yourself there because you wanted to experience it. But that makes sense that you got that rush from trying to save someone else, but you embedded yourself in the trauma of the women that you were trying to save.
To go back to where we were, the perpetrators and the victims, going down on this journey really made me see that the whole freaking world lives out of unresolved trauma. Everybody is an unresolved trauma. So if you have a victim like I was, that where I don't understand how it works and I have no idea about the science and survive this and that, and I will live my entire life as a victim. And same is the so-called criminals. And yes, some of them are criminals. So I'm just gonna call them criminals. But that side of the there's no sides, but that group of people who know nothing but how to do that. I was groomed to be a victim, but if my mother was a criminal, I would be a criminal. It's that simple, for most likely, right? So what do we do in a society when we have all this? Well, like you said, stop throwing money at the outcome. But the reason why we throw money at the outcome, which is let's just put them in jail and let's just put them in safe houses, well, the safe house is not going to heal them. Not 3 months old or a year. You can't heal 25 years of trauma in 3 months. And that's what I usually say to social workers, right? So throughout this journey, what I figured it out is our governments change every 4 months or 4 years, 4 months, 6 months. So when governments get in power, they don't want to look at root causes because the outcome, the good outcome, the positive outcome, we're not going to see it for 15 years. And by then, who cares? Because no one's going to vote for them 15 years from now. So the governments that are in charge, no matter which government we're talking about, that's why we don't put money into prevention. If you ever research how much money we put actually in prevention versus the after, I'm talking about billions of dollars go here and maybe hundreds of thousands to prevention, right? And so I think that is the biggest problem. And I think until social workers, police, frontline workers, and everybody comes together and say, okay, we need a change, because I don't know about you, Jordana, but I do a lot of workshops with police and service providers. And this is the conversation we are having now. That's actually my brand new material that I do now. And the beginning of the workshops, I ask, how many of you are exhausted? Every single one of them put up their hand. And at the end, they say I want to do this job because I want to make a difference. And I don't feel like I'm making a difference at all. One lady said to me, I think I work in a trauma loop, she said. Because I worked for CAS 20 years ago. Now I'm working with the same kids, the kids of the kids of the kids that was rescued by CAS.
Yes.
So I think everybody is exhausted of how the world is, how are we doing things? So I'm on a new mission.
And community groups have been talking about this for years because, as you know, I've done a lot of outreach and spoken on a lot of panels that are run by community groups and want to talk about how do we, stop this cycle of recidivism and reincarceration. And it's like the government doesn't want you to stop the cycle, right? The reality is, I think the criminal justice system is $1 billion industry, and there's an economy that's based on crime that isn't just the crimes itself, but those that capture the so-called criminals and prosecute and judge and incarcerate. Like the amount of personnel that it takes in order to run this system and continue this machine to cycle through is a huge part of our economy.
You said something really important. And at the end of my workshops, I love my people. I love my social service providers. I love the correction. I love the people that I work with. And I do this out of love, not because I'm pointing fingers, because we are all in this together, right? And to your point, what you just said, at the end, I usually say, so how many of you think the system is broken? Everybody puts their hands up. And then I ask them, I'm like, well, who is the system? That's silent. Like, you are the system. If we want to make a change, we need to change that. You, I'm just only here for 2 years. I don't care. I met a police officer who was on a job for 6 months and became the first human trafficking investigator in that police station 2 years later. I don't care how long you've been here. If you want to make a change, you are part of the system. So I was always a huge fan of stop pointing fingers, stop, attacking whoever. I just slash the government, but I actually don't care. The governments are changing all the time. So that's why I don't even go to Ottawa anymore. I don't get involved in anything anymore because it's depending on which way the wind blows. I go to the source, which is the frontline workers. Those are the people that are glued to our society. one way or another, right? The correction officers, the probation, they are the glue of our society, or at the very least, the society or the part of the society that both of us serve.
What's happening right now in our correctional institutions is an absolute abomination. I don't know if
What's
you've been
happening?
seeing
Tell
it.
me.
So right now, guys that are serving provincial time, so the majority of whom have not even been convicted of anything yet, they are in custody waiting for their trial. In Ontario, they are triple bunked now since COVID. So the majority of them are 3 to a cell in which there's only 1 bunk bed. The either lowest guy on the totem pole, or if there isn't one, they rotate, has to sleep on the floor. They're lucky if they get a mattress. They are rarely out able to use phones. They're going days and days and days without showers. I have guys with religious needs that aren't being met. They're being completely ignored. Guys that are trying to keep halal that are being fed pork. It's an absolute travesty of what's happening. It is inhumane to the point that judges are starting to consider staying charges. They are lowering sentences. It's decision after decision after decision from a multitude of institutions. There was just this huge shakedown at Maplehurst where the correctional officers went into an entire range, brought guys out, had them illegally strip searched, had them sitting in nothing but their boxer shorts, facing a wall for hours and hours on end. They weren't fed. They were left in cold cells. Like, it's just, it's the subject of a class action lawsuit right now, and has been through, the ringer in the media for whatever that matters. So, you've got these guys that are being sentenced in the institutions, and this is how they're being treated. I don't know how society thinks they're ever going to come out of this and just be, respectful of authority in any form or fashion when this is how you are treated when you were at your most vulnerable. And so that's what's going on the inside that, we can point the finger and say, oh, it's horrible that they're being treated that way. Sure, we can all agree to that. But what are you doing afterwards? Where's
Right.
the reintegration that's actually going to help these young men reenter society and in a way that actually allows them to live in a pro-social existence? It's not possible.
And again, I haven't heard that. I didn't know
Which is
that was
crazy because
going
you're
on.
working with correctional
Right.
officers. Like, what the fuck are they talking about when these are the phone calls that I get every single day across this province.
The kind of calls I get is that they are exhausted from not having enough resources, and they need to make do with what they have. And they are retiring, they living on the highest rate. So there's so much PTSD. I mean, so we're looking at a society and a system that it really isn't working anymore. And that is my whole point too.
I don't know if
And
it ever was. Was there ever a point in history where we're like, oh, yeah, the incarceration system is doing a bang up job of making sure that, people who are dangerous to society are locked away? People who are suffering from trauma are giving the treatment and the resources they need to come out and live well. And people who are factually innocent are not being convicted. Is there ever a point in which, like, all 3 of those factors fall into play in a way that successfully works? I don't know.
I think there are a couple of countries in Europe who are actually succeeding in this kind of work.
The Nordic countries, I've heard.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. But no, I don't know this world long enough because I was 30 when I got in, and I certainly wasn't working on that side of the
Right.
fence. I worked on this side of the fence, so I can't really speak to that too much. I do like how you make a differentiation in between people. Some people really need to be locked up, and I 100% agree. And there's, the category where they're traumatized and they can be completely rehabilitated. And then there's a category where they're actually just innocent and whatever. But you're right. We don't put enough time, energy, and resources to start categorize that, let alone rehabilitation programs. But the same goes to victims. What I can tell you from our side is that there are a lot of programs, there are a lot of support and services, but at the end of the day, there's still not enough housing. At the end of the day, the victim goes in a safe house, comes out 6 months later with still not enough skills, right? And not only that,
Why can't she just go to work? I don't understand.
Well, you are very different.
I don't understand.
I know you don't understand.
This is the
But-
part that kills me because, when my clients come into jail, they don't have anything close to the level of coddling of the so-called victims, even if their history is almost the same. It's the flip side of the same coin for a lot of these individuals.
Well, the difference is that your client goes to jail because he's been the abuser. So he's the one who's been in charge for the last, say, 2 to 3 to 4 years in how the abuse happens, when it's going to happen, he's free, he's doing whatever he's doing. The victim is not free. The victim has no freedom. The victim is being beaten. The victim is sleeping with 10, 15 men a day. I mean,
sometimes, but you're talking about on the extreme sides of that, right?
Well,
a lot of these girls, they stay because they think that he loves her.
A lot of the cases I worked on, yeah, the girl who had all kinds of injuries, I fed her for a week through a strap because her jaws were completely dislocated. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to cuddle her until her jaws go back to normal.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
But 6 months, a year, whatever, she spends time in the safe house. She gets the counseling she needs. She gets to a place
but
that
that's
she's
the problem.
Physically healthy. Why does society need to continue paying for her housing? Because you say there's not enough housing. Why is it our responsibility to pay for her housing?
So first of all, we are not paying their housing because there's no housing. B, there's no programs for them to be paid for long-term housing. It doesn't exist. These girls, after traumatized and doing what they did, they might be in a safe house. But that's my point is the counseling that we are doing right now, which is why I'm on a new mission. It's a talk counseling. It's not going to the subconscious. It's not actually working on trauma. So you can get her out of the safe house 6 months later. You can even, and we've done this many times, and I'm talking from experience. You can put me in a condo, but if I can't pay for it, and I can't pay for it because even I have 3-4 jobs. One of the jobs that I attracted is a guy who wants to constantly have sex with me in the back room because I feel vulnerable, because my mindset is not fully clean, and I still have the. Well, it's a long story, and then I have nightmares, then I'm triggered, then I have financial crisis, and then I'm so effed up for a week from just not feeling good that I don't go to work, and then I get fired. That's actually pretty normal. Now, here's another side. We want to work too, like as survivors. I want to work. I had 3-4 jobs, but I was always broke, and I always ended up in some scumbag's basement as a landlord who constantly just exploited me, right? So the coddling, I think the idea behind the cuddling is a good idea, but I think how we go about it most of the time, I actually don't think it's effective. So on that piece, I'm going to agree with you, but I do believe that there needs to be cuddling, especially for the person who was on the other hand of being abused and victimized. Now, that's not said that I don't have a complete understanding of the abuser. And I understand that, especially now that I mentor a couple of them and I had a lot of conversations with them, they don't feel any better about themselves when they do that. Right. I completely understand that. So I don't think it's about who should be cuddled more or less. I think it's about when can we get the rest of society to understand that both of them are coming from unresolved trauma, and that's where we should be focusing on. Either prevent it, or if you can't prevent it, how are we actually going to help them to clear or heal that trauma? So to your point, Dr. Joe Dispenza, this guy who's a neuroscientist, he actually goes to jails and prisons in the United States. And he does all kinds of neuro work and breath work and a whole bunch of stuff where they go dig deep inside and basically take out all that thoughts that they have in their subconscious, so that when they actually get out of jail, their first thing isn't when they get stressed to go back to their old ways of doing it. Now they can actually heal and do it the other way. But that's the same thing what we should do for victims too, and we don't do that at all.
Agreed. I think that both sides of the equation need to take responsibility for whatever circumstances led them to that path. Correct. That's the reality. And if they're not taking responsibility for themselves, then it's not up for society in general to take responsibility for them.
Right.
I think that it has to come from ourselves.
And I think that's why when you mentor people, the ones who says one day, just get up and say, you know what? I had enough of the life I had. I tried everything, didn't work. I'm going to try your way or whatever you suggest. And they just get their shit together in 3 months. And then the ones that work with for years and years and years, and they just don't get, and that's when we say you're not like they're not ready. But again, that sounds judgmental to me. Like it's not my life. And the only reason why I want to help them, because I know how life can be so freaking delicious when you do make that choice, right?
Yes.
You made the choice.
Yes.
You got up, you're like, okay, that's enough. I'm
can't
going
do
to
this
get
anymore.
my life together. And you did. And you have
Yes.
everything you ever wanted, right? From what I see from your social media, especially your cars. So, you know what I mean?
Life is good. Life is,
Yeah.
there's no question. It's been, I've been a lawyer now for 17 years and I've put in that work. I think the most interesting thing for me in the work that you've done has been around that, what you've called financial trauma. I'll never forget, did that camp. You did the retreat, Timea's retreat
You were awesome.
many, many years ago, and you wanted to bring me in as a guest speaker, and I showed up as the defense lawyer, which I should have just worn like an evil villain hat and showed up because it was like crazy.
And the girls loved you, by the way.
Thank you. No, it was a great chat. We had a really, really good discussion at the end. They let their guard down. I let mine. But you wanted me to come back the next morning because you were doing the workshop on the financial piece. And you and I had so many conversations about finances because for me, I'm always like, investing has always been so important. Financial knowledge has always been so important and something that I had to learn. I was fortunate enough that, my grandparents helped teach me some of the basics about how to manage money. That definitely did not come from my mom. She was lover, obviously, most important human in my life, but she was not good with money. And so thank God that, my grandparents taught me just how to save and how to use credit and, how to grow, and also suggested that I have a financial advisor. And for me, finances has always been really important. And I've always looked at money as a tool and it's, a way, it's something for me to use. And so I thought everybody thinks like this. And I thought that, the women that you were helping come out of sex trafficking, the goal was to make their own money, right? Because, basics of it is that they're working and someone is taking all of their money from them. And now they need to get on their feet and be able to like have their own and make as much money as they could to put themselves in a better place. That in my head was just always, that's what made sense. And so you had me come to this workshop. I remember just sitting in the back thinking, why am I here? It's like a Sunday morning. Why am I here at a finances workshop with these, young women that are exiting sex trafficking? And you made everyone go around and say in one word what they thought about money. And here I was, I think that I had just started my own practice and everything I did was about how to use money efficiently and how to use my money to make more money and how to grow to become, as financially successful as I could. Like, and that was my headspace 90% of the time. Like most of what I did in life at that time was geared to, how to become financially successful. And so I expected these women to say how much they loved money and how much it meant to them and tie their self-worth into their finances. And I know you're shaking your head right now at me because it was the exact opposite. They talked about money being dirty, money being disgusting, money being something they couldn't even hold on to. They would get $20 and spend it right away because they didn't even want it in their hands. And I was like flabbergasted to hear about this hatred for something that, is so ingrained in us and was really like dictated the worst moments of their life. And so I know that, you've also created some incredible workshops trying to help break that line of thinking.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
So what are you doing today? What does life look like for you today? Because you're no longer doing the frontline work. What are you doing?
So very rarely I get called to do cases from like the States or Europe. If it's like a really big case, they call me. And so I still do some behind the scenes, but that's like once in a blue moon. I still have my company. So TC Online Institute, we still do online training. I still believe in training regardless, because I think the sooner you take people out of, the traumatizing situation, the less time they need to kind of heal in, trauma counseling 40 years later, I
Yes.
think. So I believe in trauma or training. That's TC Online Institute. Um, I actually started a production company, a TV production company.
Amazing.
So I was a producer before I was trafficked. So 25 years later, as a anniversary, my husband and I started a production company. So we actually started producing TV shows um, on obviously all around this topic. So
Amazing.
we are producing documentaries and TV series. We can't really talk a lot about it right now. So that's actually very, very exciting. Really just bringing all these conversations to like a much broader level. And then in 2017, just after the retreat, I started a bath and body workshop.
Yes.
And that was for job training, and it was awesome. And then COVID hit. We were about to get into Indigo and all kinds of retail stores. It was really cool. We were in Forbes when we opened, and COVID hit. So we closed, took a break, and then we just reopened Timea's Market. And now we are in 7 retail stores in Muskoka.
It's amazing.
We're opening our online, but yeah, just the same thing, just in different ways. And the biggest thing that I'm very excited about is the workshop. So I started this whole new content. It's called Trauma Lab. We created a whole course on it, but it's like I'm so excited. I have not done workshops or presentations in the last 2 to 3 years, because I said I don't want to be a part of the problem anymore. I don't want to talk about the same thing over and over again. I want to find a way to like revolutionize the way we do social services. So I'm on a mission, girl, man. I'm on a mission. So I'm trying to recruit as many agencies. We're going on a tour in fall and next year all across Canada with Trauma Lab. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about. But most importantly, we're going to teach them about neuroscience and all that. But most importantly, how can we actually change the system together? So I'm stoked about it. I figured I did the whole human trafficking in 15 years, and we came a long way. We've done a lot of stuff. So I'm 48 now, so I'm gonna give it another 15 years to this kind of work and this kind of revolution, and see what we can get done. So you're welcome to join, madame, if you want.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. I've loved that you take a hardline position, but are willing to listen to the other side. And I think that's really where, you and I have had our most incredible and most explosive conversations, is because we do come at it from different perspectives. But at the end of the day, we want the same thing, and we want to see people that aren't suffering the way that they are right now. And it's to try to end, this cycle. And that cycle happens on so many different levels and so many different sides. So if people are listening to this and they are loving what you're saying, and they want to hear more, maybe they're suffering from trauma, maybe maybe it's the parent of a young woman or a young man who has become involved in this world, and they want to get them help. How do they connect with you and your resources? How do they find you?
Sure. It's just the website, timeanaggie.com. That's
Okay.
one of them.
Yes.
And on timeanaggie.com, there's a link called Trauma Lab. So they can actually research the whole thing. If they want to jump on a course, they can. But if not, they can just connect with us. And we have a ton of free resources as well.
Amazing.
And we also have a podcast. It's mainly for frontline workers, but in a podcast, we talk a lot about it. It's called Heart of the Frontline Podcast. I'm not really good at it, to be honest. I don't really care. I record once and then I leave it I don't really build it, but we are in season 2 now. So if you check it out, cool. If not, like, cool. I think Jordana's is way cooler. So.
I think it's important for people to be able to connect with you and your message, because what you are doing is truly, truly incredible on so many different fronts. And thank you so much for being here. I thank you for your time. I thank you for bringing your incredible energy to this show. And as always, I look forward to seeing what you're doing and being a part of it.
This was fun.
It's
Thank
amazing.
you for having me.
Anytime. Thank you.